So, Colin, I recently came across a very clever marketing example from a colleague of mine, Omar Rodriguez Villa, who teaches with me, and he started using this example in class, and I thought it was brilliant. So,
Right.
there's a hotel in Los Angeles called the Magic Castle Hotel, and
Okay.
it's on TripAdvisor. It's currently in the top 10 of all hotels in Los Angeles, and there are
Right.
hundreds and hundreds on the site. If I showed you pictures of this hotel, you would not be impressed. It
Right.
looked to me like an old apartment complex that was converted into some hotels. So, kind of cinder block walls, kind of a central courtyard, and then just some surrounding bungalows. It's all painted yellow, like it's nothing special.
Sure.
Um, but the consumer reviews of this hotel are just off the charts.
Right.
People love it. And what is fascinating to me is that most of the positive comments are about service. So they have really
Right.
good service there, but it is mostly kind of trivial things that people are raving about. So let
Right.
me give you an example. The
Yeah.
thing that people talk about most often in the reviews that I've read is there's a pool in the central courtyard, and it's a very family friendly hotel. A lot of people bring their kids there, and next to the pool on the wall, they have this red phone, um, and above it is a sign that says "Popsicle Hotline." Uh, and so if you're a kid swimming in the pool, you can get out of the pool and go over and pick up the red phone, and it'll go to, I assume, the front desk or something. And you can order a popsicle, and they'll send an employee out, like white glove service, on a silver tray, and they'll have popsicles, and they'll bring it over to the kid at the pool, and all the kids can grab whatever popsicle. Now, they have pictures of the employee doing this. These are not high end popsicles. These are like the basic frozen treat that you get at the store. They probably cost 40 cents a piece or something.
Sure.
And it's a minute or two out of the employee's day each time the phone is ringing.
When the phone rings, is there a recorded message that says your call's important to us, and do they keep them waiting for 40 minutes?
They make
So
them
you can
go through an
imagine
elaborate phone
imagine
tree.
th- this kid standing there freezing because he's just got out of the swimming pool, and there's a queue of other people waiting to use the hotline. Anyway,
Yes.
no, sorry.
Yeah, that's exactly that. They're looking to replicate the experience of adulthood for these children. Like, this is what you got to look forward, kids.
Yeah, yeah. We want you to go through the frustration we have to go through all the time.
That's the magic, kid. No, the phone goes directly to Batman, and then
Right.
Batman takes care of it. Yeah. No, but I
That's
mean,
really
like,
good.
how expensive is that? Like, how
Yeah,
expensive was that to set up?
yeah,
How difficult? How expensive is it to maintain? And yet, you could imagine where somebody could have gone. Well, what we need to do is we need to double the size of the pool, and we need to add a water slide, and we need to like do all this. Instead, some brilliant person was like, "No, like
yeah,
let's give kids
yeah,
popsicles by the pool."
yeah. No, and that's a great example. So today we're going to talk about the disproportionate effect that
Yes,
small things can have on a customer experience, and I personally think this is an area that's sort of um, underrated, and
yes,
all too often organisations immediately go to the big fixes of the things that are going wrong. And just building on that, I mean, I genuinely believe that organisations spend too much time on fixing things that are going wrong
yes.
rather than thinking of these little things that they could do that would make the experience really much better. And there are a number of examples. Anything else they do in that hotel?
They do. They talk about the service personnel being very responsive to kind of individual needs and kind of what they overhear. So somebody pointed out that when they were at in California, they went to visit, I don't know, Universal Studios or something, and one of the kids was into one of the video game characters and was in costume and things. And so the staff like hid little trinkets from that video game around the hotel that this kid could
Right,
go and
great,
find. And I
yeah,
mean, So yeah, they were very responsive. I don't want
Yeah.
to seem like they had this one little trick that they did. Like this was an
No.
ethos for
Sure.
them.
Sure.
But it like this place gets higher ratings than the Four Seasons
Sure.
because they just
And I
delight
think
their customers.
that's the important thing, isn't it? I mean, it's the ethos, it's the thought
Yes,
process, it's the making sure you're getting the right people in the
yes,
recruitment to think these things through. It's the management structures that enable these things to happen. It's the not measuring the hell out of everybody for every moment they're spending. Just I don't know what the measure is of how many popsicles they deliver, but you get the idea. All too often, measures are put in place that force these little things out. An example that a couple of examples that I've had, which I think have been great. We were once doing what we call a customer mirror, which is effectively where we go and act as a customer, and we were reviewing a number of courier stores, so where people take parcels in to send them around. And one of the ones that we went into that really made a difference to us was that someone had put flowers, freshly cut flowers, in the store.
mhm, yeah,
So as soon as you walked in, you smelt flowers,
yeah,
and it's just again, it's that little thing. It's like when you go into the hotel and and the toilet paper has got the folded
yeah.
V on it.
A little seal on it,
I
and
guess you know why they do that. Do you know why they do that?
no, and I'm afraid now to ask why.
Well, it's effectively a signal, a
Oh, I got it.
nudge.
That
Yeah,
it's been tended to since the last guest.
correct.
Yeah,
That they've done something, and it's
yeah,
those little. Sometimes it's those little nudges that you need. Another example as I was thinking this stuff through was I've been on a number of cruises where they um, will create animal figures out of
yeah,
towels. Have you seen those?
yep,
So you actually look forward to going back to your room and go, I wonder what they've done today. you
yeah,
know and again, it's not a huge thing. But I certainly remember being on a couple of cruises with the kids, and every night we went back, it was, I wonder what this is, and can we go to bed with that one tonight, Daddy, and all the rest of it. So little things that do have a big effect.
yeah. We had a fascinating conversation. Gosh, I don't know if it was a year and a half ago now on the podcast, where we interviewed somebody who designed Scentscapes, where and audioscapes, where
Yes.
they would companies would hire, and so like when you went into a retail store, you would smell a certain fragrance or perfume. Those little things can matter a lot. Like when they do tip the scale. I remember when I was a child, we sold our home, and my mom took this very seriously. Where before the first open house, she staged everything in the house, and it was cleaner than it had ever been when we lived there with 5 kids. But
Sure.
she even put something on the stove so that the whole house smelled like vanilla. So she put
Right.
some kind of concoction in there and made the whole sound. And there were multiple offers on the house that day, and I think in large part it was because of these very small. It was not a great house, if I can
Sure.
emphasize, but she staged it in such a way that all of the little details were right and
Sure.
made a big difference in the overall
Sure.
impression of the house.
Sure. And so I was, as I was thinking about this, there are nudges, aren't they?
Yes.
Which is a nudges goes, for those of you that haven't read the book called Nudge by Richard Thaler. Very good book. I would recommend that you read it. There are nudges which are effectively directional things, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the chocolate on the pillow is another example, which talks a bit about care and luxury and all those other things. One that Lorraine, my wife, has recently got into because having done this podcast with you now for a number of years, I sort of psychoanalyze everything that Lorraine tells me now. Yeah.
Oh,
Don't tell her.
God.
Okay, don't tell her I told you this.
I'm glad this podcast is going to ultimately be responsible for your divorce, Colin. I'm sure that.
But we were driving down Sarasota Main Street the other day, and there was a restaurant that we'd been meaning to go to, right? Um, and there were people sitting outside. And Lorraine looked over and she said, "That's the restaurant I want to go to." She said, "They've got linen tablecloths."
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
and when I
I
when,
love
when
that.
I started to chat to her about it, I said, "Well, so what does that mean?" Oh, well, linen tablecloths are much better than
Yeah.
paper tablecloth. And when you think about it, a tablecloth does say something about the quality that you're gonna. You can either go in and it's going to be just a tabletop, yeah, or a plastic tabletop, or
Yep.
a paper tabletop, or a linen tabletop, or a tabletop with a linen and then the paper on top, so they can roll it all up, and But
Or
it's
nothing. Yeah.
yeah, or not, yeah. But it does start to say people think about these things and use them to make decisions about directions they go without them necessarily articulating it. Now, in this case, Lorena actually articulated it, but it's clear she's thought that for a number of years. It's the first time I've ever heard her say it, though.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's a great example, and it could be like the best or the fanciest food in the world, and yet if you don't have those right signals, somebody might not even go into the restaurant to try it because
Yes,
they're turned off by the other things that you're communicating, including the tablecloths.
yes, no, and it does. It made me think about the branding, and the interesting bit for me is we went to Disneyland Paris at Christmas, um, and I haven't been there to Disneyland for a number of years now. Um, but it reinforced with me their attention to detail,
Yes.
which is quite incredible. And all of these little things, like when you go into Adventureland and you look at the floor and there are imprints of leaves and people's shoes and stuff like that. And one thing they really understand is that attention to detail, don't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, so this will get. I'll weave this into kind of my first bit of advice around this. If you want to have these small nudges, these like opportunities to like small things that create a lot of value, um, you're not gonna like trick people into this. So you need to have everything like kind of right. You need to have like brought people at least to neutral before you can kind of nudge them in any particular way. If they had the popsicle hotline and yet the rooms were dirty at that hotel, nobody's going to care about the popsicle hotline,
Sure,
right? You need to
sure,
be right. So Disney creates, a really entertaining experience, and then from that baseline, they then also look for every opportunity to delight on top of that. So
sure,
if you're looking for small things that'll make a big difference and you're not getting the basics right, focus on the basics first. Like you need to
sure,
bring people at least to neutral before you can nudge them into positive territory.
sure, sure. No, I agree. But let me give you another example, though, of how small things can have a really big effect. So in England, I want to say 7 years ago, something like that, they wanted to reduce the consumption of plastic bags.
Yes.
Okay, so you go to a grocery store, and this still happens here in the States. The amount of plastic bags you get is just bloody ridiculous, basically.
Yep.
Um, at the same time, a I don't know if you ever saw the David Attenborough series called The Blue Planet.
Yep. Beautiful.
Incredible photography. But the last episode was effectively the effect of plastic bags on the ocean and
Yeah.
the fact that they obviously don't biodegrade and blah, 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 blah. So, long and short of it is the government rightly so, introduced the policy of if you went into a shop, um, they would charge you 5 pence, so I don't know, 8 cents, yeah, for a plastic bag, okay, like a tax, yeah. Um, the use of plastic bags reduced by 85%.
Yeah.
Okay, little small change, massive impact. Okay,
So, I mean,
and
let's
now,
talk about why you think that that worked, because I think that it's a fascinating example. And
yeah,
you could imagine economists saying that's not going to affect anybody. Like nobody's going to blink at 8 cents difference in their grocery bill. Like that's not going to work. And yet it obviously did. Why?
yeah. So I think there's a combination of things that happened at that was happening at that point. So one was, um, even though it's 5p, yeah, people are going, bloody hell, I don't spend 5p every time I
Yep.
come into this place. Um, so that's one. Second thing was, um, you could then get bags that were, they called them lifetime bags. So
Mhm.
they would sell you for 40p a lifetime bag. Okay. And if I go back to my youth, and potentially I'm now showing my age, but if I go back to my youth, I remember my mum going into a greengrocers, buying potatoes and saying, I'll have, 4 pound of potatoes, them getting the potatoes and her opening her bag that she'd bought and they just stuck them all in there. And then she'd say, I'll have, a pound of onions, and they'd just stick them all in there. Didn't put them in bloody bags.
Yep.
She just took her own bags. So what the point I'm trying to make is there was acceptance of the way that could be done, and people had some bags or could buy them fairly inexpensively. And I guess the second thing, and when you're talking about this type of thing and you're talking about change, was there was also an acceptance that it was wrong to be filling the ocean full of bloody plastic bags. And there was effectively, um, if you want to get change, one of the things you've got to do with change is you've got to get people to believe in the change that you're making. And I think it was, as we always say, it's never one thing; it's the combination of all those factors coming together that really move the dial. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's great. So if we're looking to kind of map out when will these small things matter in a big way, I think that there are a couple of nice points to emphasize from that story. One, in that case, we seem to have been dealing with an instance where people mostly wanted to do the right thing, but there was kind of this habit or inertia that was
Yes.
causing them to not. And so in
Yes.
those cases, like a small pause or reminder of some kind might actually matter, right? So
Sure.
we can imagine other scenarios like that where your customers generally kind of are leaning towards some behavior, but they're not doing it in that way already. So can we have a small nudge in that instance that might, just reminding people of that 5p charge each time is going to be enough to get them to realize, like, oh wait, I don't actually want to behave this way. Let me try something else. I
Yeah.
also think the idea that it was very salient, that like at your checkout, like it was staring you there in the face. You might have had to like make that deliberate choice on the system to like push the button and say yes, I'm willing to pay the extra 5 cents. Making it very, very in your face like that is going to motivate people. The way that we pay for gas in the United States, and I assume elsewhere in the world, where you're pumping it and you have to watch the money like drain out of your account like right in front of
Sure.
you, as the that makes paying for gasoline, or petrol as you might call it in other parts of the world,
Yeah.
it makes it a much more salient way of paying for things, whereas if it was just like bundled into a monthly bill, it would feel very different for us. So the fact that they made that 5 pence charge very salient, I think also made it have a disproportionate impact. So as you're thinking about this in your own business, think about that. Like, is there going to be a lot of resistance to this? If so, then a small nudge might not work. Or are
Sure.
people already kind of leaning in a direction and just need a little shove? Are you
Yeah.
making the nudge such that it's causing people to like realize that it's there and reevaluate what they're doing? So we'll keep a running list of this advice as we go through other examples.
Yeah, and let me build on that, because I think there's a couple of other things that are interesting. One is, I think the price of buying a bag now is something like 30p.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, I don't know, because I don't ever buy
Yeah.
bags anymore.
Yeah.
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 The,
You
the,
changed your
the,
behavior.
yeah. So I think there's that definitely the change of behavioural thing. The other interesting bit is, I was just thinking about this as you were talking. What I tend to do now is, if I go in and buy 10 items, and I've forgotten to take a bag, I now wander
Just
out the
carry them
shop
out.
juggling, with I don't know, a pack of toothpaste into one pocket, and a
It's,
banana down the other pocket, so I can carry everything to
this
the
is why
car.
cargo pants should have never gone out of fashion. Just need more pockets. Hill I will die on. Yes.
So, do you want to tell your story about Beats, the brand?
Sure. Yeah. So, as we're thinking about little things that can make a big difference, they can be policies like the bag charge. They can also be integral to the product design. So, there was a scandal. It was a couple of years ago now at this point, where Beats is a headphones brand that was very popular,
Yeah,
and somebody took them apart and discovered that there were inside of Beats headphones just inert pieces of metal. So inside there were the electronics components, and there was the foam to make it comfortable in your ear, and then there were also just like pieces of metal that were like welded onto the rest of the frame. And it was pretty obvious that they were there just to increase the weight of the headphones, right? So if you lift
sure,
something up and it's light, then there's this signal that it's like lower quality and cheap plastic. Whereas
sure,
if you lift it up and it has some heft to it, that
sure,
sends this real subtle signal that, oh, this must be value. There's a
sure.
similar thing going on with some credit cards, where I don't know if you have any credit cards that are like thicker, and some are even metal now, where
Yes,
some credit cards are heftier. And
yes,
and part of that is just psychological signaling, like, oh, this is a high quality card. Like, this is
yes.
nice.
The interesting part of that is, so you, the you, you knew I was going to talk about Apple at some point during
I
this
had a
show,
suspicion, Colin.
but guess what? I've got an Apple credit card. You
And
wouldn't believe that, would you? Eh? Um, but
I
I
am actually
actually,
surprised. I'm surprised you don't have an Apple chip embedded in your wrist that you just wave over things at this point.
but I sent off, or not sent off. I asked for a physical card, okay, as well. I don't know why I did that, to be totally honest with you, but I have, and it's metal, okay,
Yep.
and it's a pain in the neck,
Yep.
uh, because it's metal, and
Yep.
when you're putting it in your wallet, it doesn't bend,
Yep.
and so the
Takes
interesting
up more
part of that.
space. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So the irony is I don't carry it around now. The reality is I don't need to carry it around, because it's obviously on the phone or the watch anyway. But the interesting part of that story for me is that there must be a weight that Beats decided upon, because there must also be a weight that was too much
Yeah.
and a weight that was not enough.
Yeah.
And again, is how do you find that out? Well, I guess you've got to test it with people, haven't you, to find out where their levels of perception are. And this goes back to, and you know that we do this research we call an emotional signature, which is identifies those hidden things that people are making judgments on. So what we've said before on this podcast, what customers tell you and what they do or what they buy can be very different, and therefore, that emotional signature gets used for identifying what some of these small things are. And going back to the top of the show with your example of the popsicle line, effectively what drives value,
Right.
yeah. So although totally agree that the hotel needs to be clean and all the basics need to be done, but are there other things that you could do that would drive value as well?
Yeah. Absolutely. Do you have other examples that you want to share?
I do. Let me go down my list here. Oh, couple of examples. One is I went to the dentist recently, and as they're poking around in my mouth, I'm looking at the bloody ceiling,
Yeah,
and there's nothing on the ceiling.
yeah,
There is nothing for me to concentrate on. Okay, um, and there was a radio playing in the background. Clearly, the whatever the I guess the dentist was wanting to listen to, but it made me think as they're poking around, they're not thinking of me.
no,
What I would have wanted at that point is because I don't like everybody else, don't like going to the dentist. I wanted something to distract me,
yeah,
so there wasn't anything I could look at, and actually the radio station it was on was annoying,
yep,
and it made me think when I get into a Uber, I can ask the person what music to play. Yeah, he didn't ask me what music I wanted playing or what I wanted to do. So it made me again think, the opportunity to even just put some, I don't know, where's Wally picture on the ceiling, so you at least you could look at something. I mean, and again, it's not going to cost huge amounts of money, but it is just that type of thinking, isn't it?
yeah. No, it's a great example. I remember the first time I went to a dentist that had a TV kind of on the ceiling that you could look at, and they showed me where I could change the channels, and it was like kind of speakers were right by my ears so that I could listen to it as they were doing their business. And it was great, and it was such a delight. It was so unusual at that time. It's become more common now. Similar to your experience, when I was in my early 20s, I had to get a root canal, and the office was super cold for some reason, and they were playing country music loudly over the speaker, and I had this moment of pause where I'm like, "Am I actually in hell? Like, have I died? And this is my..." Because it's hard to imagine like a worse confluence of kind of factors. But yeah, like these things, it was so unusual at the time that a dentist was thinking about like my kind of
Sure,
comfort and preferences.
sure,
And
sure,
that's another kind of category of these nudges, these things
sure.
that'll make a big difference, is when you are surprising your customers, when you're giving them something that none of their competitors are giving them, or that they were
Yes,
not expecting, that you're doing it in a way that they weren't expecting. Um,
yeah. But
there was a
I think
study.
it.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go on. No, you
There was
carry
a
on.
study done where they trained wait staff to do one of several things when they were dropping off the check at the table. So some people did it normal way, just with a smile and thanks for coming. Other people gave them the check and then also a few of those mints, after dinner
Yeah,
mints, along with the check. That group got higher tips, just by including. And again,
sure,
these mints are like a half a cent each,
sure,
but it was a kind of a signal that like, here's something special. The group that got the highest tips though, like brought it over the check, placed a few mints on the table, and then turned and walked away, took two steps, and then said, "You know what?" and came back and dropped some additional mints on the
all
table,
right.
as in like
That's
kind
a
of
good
a
one.
just for you
Yeah,
guys. I'm gonna like
yeah,
this is what I'm
yeah,
supposed to do. But
yeah,
that
yeah.
group
Good
got
idea.
the most tips out of
Yeah,
anybody.
yeah.
And it was
I've never
again,
had
it's
that.
a subtle signal like you're supposed to be getting this, but I'm going to
Yes,
give you even
a bit
more.
more.
You're going to be
Yeah,
delighted.
yeah, yeah. No, no. That's a good one. Good one. So, what practical advice? What let's go back to practicalities. What practical advice would you give?
So you got to bring up to your point earlier about firms like often trying to fix problems. You should fix problems, but don't stop at neutral. Like
Sure.
bringing them. Nobody remembers a neutral experience. So if you bring them back to meh, that's not good. You need to get all the basics right. Like you need to check all those boxes. But then you're in a position to do these small things that delight people. So get the basics right. Kind of figure out which way the wind is blowing. Like if your customers are dead set against something, you're not going to nudge them into that, right? But if they're already like kind of leaning in a direction, then that might be an opportunity to nudge them. Uh, look for those opportunities to surprise them, give them something they were not expecting, something they can't get anywhere else. Focus on, like you were saying, the real sources of value. That Magic Castle realizes that if you impress the adults, like that's nice, but if adults are on vacation with their kids and you can give the kids a kind of magical experience, the adults are going to appreciate that way more. All
Sure.
of the reviews that I read for this Magic Castle Hotel talked about the experience that their kids were having, because
Sure.
that was the source of value for that segment of the market. I think Disney is similar. If you can make my
Yes.
kids happy, like, oh, that's the best thing you can imagine.
Yeah.
There are obviously other segments for which you would want to have a different source of value, but figure out what that is, and then what are the small, cheap, easy, repeatable ways that you can nudge people towards a really great experience.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good list. A couple of things I would add or reinforce is don't always just focus on the negative, fixing the
Yes.
negatives and the big things. Think about what are some of the small things that you could do. My story about the dentist, I don't know how many of the dentists there are, but I mean, it's not rocket science, is it? That somebody's looking up, so you got to put something up on the ceiling. So that for me says, talk to your customers, okay, and think of what these small things are,
Or maybe sell
and
ad space up there. Like you got somebody like just staring at the ceiling for 20 minutes, like put in an advertisement for like a Ford Mustang or something. Like earn
yeah,
some extra money if you're the dentist, right?
yeah, anything, but just well, and the other thing is just put yourself in the customer's shoes.
Yes.
Because when I was actually looking up, I was looking up going, oh, look, there's a cobweb over there. Because the only thing I'm looking at is up, but I guess the reality is the dentist doesn't often lay in the chair with their head back with somebody stuck their fingers down their neck. But
Good point.
anyway, there you go. So we hope that's been of use. And if you've got any further suggestions of what it is you would like us to cover, then please obviously don't hesitate to contact us. You could drop us a line at contact@beyondphilosophy.com. That's contact@beyondphilosophy.com. Okay, thanks very much, everybody, and look forward to talking to you next week. Cheers. Thanks so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode.